Hey there, listener. Corey Andrew Powell here, and I'm excited to share that Motivational Mondays is now sponsored by BetterHelp. Feeling stressed or anxious? Well, BetterHelp brings you online therapy that's convenient and affordable. NSLS members get 50% off your first month of BetterHelp when you sign up at betterhelp.com/NSLS or click the link in the show notes. Start your journey to better mental health today. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Motivational Mondays. Today, we have a special guest, Dr. Jenny Wu, a Harvard-trained educator and emotional intelligence researcher, and the founder and CEO of Mind, Brain, Emotion. Dr. Wu has dedicated her career to exploring how emotional intelligence can transform our relationships. She created an award-winning card game series that helps people develop essential human skills. Her work in emotional intelligence impacts over 50 countries, empowering deeper, more meaningful connections. Please welcome Dr. Jenny Wu. Hey, how are you?
Hi, Corey. So great to see you again. And thank you so much for the great intro.
It's great to see you again. I know that we were in a webinar before. We were discussing emotional intelligence and how it relates to the world of soft skills and durable skills. So it's really great to sort of pick up this conversation with you once again. So let's dive in. So I want to ask you, I read this article you posted recently on the CNBC website, and it was really, really informative about emotional intelligence and sort of like these common practices with that particular area of study and people who sort of practice them every day. So can you give a little bit of a background of your journey, though, into the field of emotional intelligence and what inspired you to focus on this area?
Yeah, absolutely, Corey. Well, emotional intelligence really is so connected to many things: how to build a good relationship, how to communicate better personally, professionally, and really how to deal with the tough times when things are getting hard with obstacles. So in terms of my personal journey, I sort of really learn about these three facets of emotional intelligence ever since I was a little kid. I am the first person in my family to graduate college and an immigrant. And so coming over to the United States, not knowing a single word, let alone actually not even knowing the alphabet, really trained me to really understand how do you build relationship when you don't quite have sort of the common language? How do you read social cues? And how do you really connect with people from an emotional standpoint and finding those commonalities? And of course, it was really hard. I'm not gonna lie. I also lived without my parents for 5 years prior to coming over to the United States and reuniting with them. So there were definitely a lot of coping skills involved in adjusting to new environments, new family, and sort of new everything. And so that's also where I found the beauty of emotional intelligence and really how do you perceive something instead of as a threat, as someone, you are a victim of, versus a challenge and feeling more resourceful and hopeful rather than feeling helpless. And so, I had this inkling. I had no idea what emotional intelligence meant. I didn't know there was even such a term. So it wasn't until when I started working as a management consultant. This was Deloitte right after graduating college. And, working with leaders, developing employees, that's when I also saw the importance of emotional intelligence and sort of knowing this name in the workplace when, you don't want to have a toxic boss and you don't want to be working in a team where there's so much disconnect. There's a lack of understanding, work-life balance, right? That non-existent focus on mental health and really what you need. And this is where I saw people were burning out, even though, they had gone to great colleges and had great, jobs leading up, right? But they just weren't able to really find themselves and their purpose and advocating for their needs. And so, long story short, saw it basically from toddlerhood. I also worked as a Montessori school teacher in the classroom, to being an MBA coach at UC Berkeley, to now teaching at UC Irvine, emotional intelligence, to being a researcher in cognitive science, working with adults that are 70 plus, and understanding, how do I still, work on my memory skills, but that also goes with emotional intelligence. And how do you actually see yourself? Do you feel like you could make it work? That sort of thing. So I see this thread of emotional intelligence being so important to empower people to succeed in life, in their mental health, and at work. And at school, of course.
Yeah. I mean, I love that you start from like the early stages all the way up to the 70s. And I think what's really important about that too is people who are older in that demographic, like 70s up, they are trying to navigate a very different world than they were used to, which is even probably more terrifying when you consider technology. I know my mother for the longest time was like, trying to figure out when she was texting me and I was making like abbreviated words. She's like, what is LOL? What is LOL? But something as simple as that requires people from a different generation to have to adjust in their current time. So I imagine that might be a little difficult for some of the older people. Do you have obstacles that you've run into with that, or are they more open to the change and to learning?
Yeah, it actually is all about openness. And that's the biggest obstacle, is when you perceive yourself feeling like, I'm too late to the game, right? It's kind of like AI or, sports or whatnot. When we look at ourselves, we're like, oh, I should have started this 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Now I'm too late and it's useless, right? So that type of lack of openness, lack of curiosity, and lack of growth mindset really sets people back. And so I know we're talking about, seasoned 70 plus age people, but honestly, we're all going to be at some point feeling a bit outdated, even the Gen Zs and Gen Alphas
Right.
I work with, right? Because things are just moving so quickly, and there's so many things to, stay on top of and stay accountable for. And so that common feeling is important to notice and to be able to address it with curiosity, open-mindedness, and the ability to cope and say, you know what, I don't know what I know now, but I can find out.
I love that too, because we always stress the growth mindset here at the NSLS, which is that you're never done learning, nor should you subscribe to the idea that you are. Like I always say, till the day they put me in the ground, I'm going to be learning something. It might even be the day before they put me in the ground. I'm going to still be, just on a quest for knowledge and more. And that's what I think life should really be about. That's what keeps us all relevant and in each other's lives every day, no matter what generation we're in. But I will ask you though, when it comes to emotional intelligence, let's start by really defining what it is, because you were just saying how you were like, well, how do I articulate what that is? I didn't even know. Some people really still don't know. So what would you say is a simple explanation or description of emotional intelligence?
Yeah. So emotional intelligence in a nutshell is really our ability to perceive how we're feeling, what we're thinking, and our sort of tendencies to act a certain way. And likewise, it's also our awareness of how we perceive others around us, to what they're thinking, what they're feeling, and how they're acting. And really putting it together is using this incredible insight to then take certain actions, build good relationship, and being able to communicate and get your points across. So that's where sort of influence, charisma, right? Leadership comes in. And really, in short, being intelligent about your emotions is knowing how to make your emotions work for you and not against you. And you know how it is. Like we have so many times where we own emotions were tripping us up
Yeah.
against us, right? When we blurt something out that we later regret, we, like I have kids, so they're sort of like, what is it? Rage quit, that's the thing,
Yeah,
like for
that was a thing.
gamers.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Or just, having those emotions come out, like our buttons press and snap, and we do or say or feel something that we later regret. So that's what
Mhm.
I mean by being able to make it work for you and not against you.
Yeah, that is such a biggie. And I mean, it's probably increasingly more difficult in the era that we're in, which is so driven by a lot of civil unrest and political arguments, and it's a lot. So, I mean, if you add that to it, it's even more difficult to navigate. But you said something really important there that I really, really love, which is not just about what we are controlling, about our own emotions, but how we are also processing the emotions and the words of other people around us. That is the key. Because I think that if we don't listen with intention and we're not mindful, to your point, we're just going through life just like a ticker tape, just like,
Mm-hmm.
right? Whatever
Mm-hmm.
you're thinking, things are coming out of your mouth because you don't care. But when you care about what you're saying, how it might impact others, I think that is when a light bulb goes off for emotional intelligence. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, definitely. That is the foundation of emotional intelligence, which is this awareness. And to be aware is also caring, right? Having that empathy, but really also having the skills to know what you're looking for.
Mm,
And, at the youngest level, and honestly, really, when I teach undergrads, this is also about reading social cues because a lot of the times, like you said, there's a lot of word pollution. People are just like talking, 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 and you get
right.
whether it's social media, digitally, in person, just a lot of
Mm-hmm.
words coming at you. So being able to filter that is really important. So that's a set of skills of active listening and reading between the lines, but also not just relying on words, but also body language,
Mm,
gesturing, right? I think we talked about in that CNBC article, I wrote about mirroring.
yes.
So mirroring is being observant of other people's body language and, to give you cues and how they think. And to
Mm-hmm.
be honest, we've been through so much, especially our younger generations. I mean, it's so tough right now, and it was tough going through the pandemic. And so, quite frankly, we just didn't have enough social practice
Right,
to
right.
actually make some mistakes and to get exposure in different settings to really understand and build up these skills. And
Mm-hmm.
so that is why nowadays I have so many sort of media outlets reaching out to me and just honestly basic questions like, how do I start a conversation with strangers?
Yeah.
How do I not feel socially anxious? How do I carry a conversation? How do I be likable and look interesting? Right?
Mm-hmm.
These are all the skill sets related to emotional intelligence. And, the latest was someone had reached out for a piece on how do I become a considerate roommate? Right?
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep. It's all connected.
Well, I love that too, because that's not something that people normally in past generations cared about, right? You just would hear these horror stories about, oh, my kid went off to college and their roommate's horrible, or I had a roommate in college, it was horrible, or I just got a roommate and I can't stand them. And now I love the fact that some people are going, how can I not be that to someone else?
Yeah. And
Right.
honestly, yeah, it's a win-win because, college retention isn't, we think of academic probation, but a lot of the
Mhm.
times attrition and dropouts are also on your first year experience,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And especially if you're a transfer student, it's do I feel like I belong? Right? Do
Mhm.
I feel like I have a say? I fit in. So obviously, your participation in and outside of the classroom, including roommate situations, really will take a toll on you if
Yeah.
things are not so much what you had expected.
Yeah, it's so funny about that because I have a memory of my aunt who I absolutely adore. And she, when I was a little kid, she went off to college and it was like this big deal. She was the first one of the kids to kind of go off like that. And she was home like within months. But
Mhm.
all I kept hearing was this horrible roommate story that the girl kept eating her food and she was a pig and it just so exhausted my aunt within 2 semesters that she just
Mm.
was stressed. And she came home and she ended up working, until retirement, but she never went back to college. And that experience was such a catalyst in her decision because it's already like there's enough pressure already with school. Now you add this other component to it, right? So I love that maybe together collectively we are helping others by being better ourselves at something. I just think it's really cool that you're seeing someone asking about how to be a better roommate. It's pretty
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah. Oh my gosh, what a powerful anecdote.
Mm,
That's
yeah.
such a bummer, right?
It is. And that's why it resonates because I remember as a child, I was like terrified to go to college. I'm like, well, wait a
Oh,
minute. I'm like, well, wait a minute. When I get older, is my roommate going to eat all my food? I don't know if I want to go to college.
what
I
a
mean,
long box. Yeah, oh, that's
yeah.
so good. So the tricky thing with emotional intelligence is very much what you said, right? We want to better ourselves for us, but also for others. And we also need others to better themselves because
Yeah.
you can be super intelligent and you can get very, very far.
Yeah.
But wouldn't you prefer a more inclusive, empathetic, and just other people being emotionally intelligent back, right?
Hmm.
So it really takes a village. And that's why, when I speak in corporate settings and companies, it's all about the culture, all about everybody, the
Right.
team cohesively working together.
Yes, and I think that a part of that too that I've processed, that's a bigger part of the how I've evolved, um, is also not putting my emphasis on what I think people would do in a situation just because it's what I would do. And I think it's benefited me. I would get upset at people who didn't respond to something the way I would have. And once I've realized that, you know what, we all respond to things differently, instead of being upset, ask someone, why did you see it that way? What made you respond that way? And try to process it to understand them better. So it really ties a lot into that is in the workplace as well. You have a boss you mentioned earlier in the workplace. Toxic bosses are bad. So it's good for people to learn this skill too, so they can know how to approach their employees. So how does that for you come into play when you have to deal with leaders in the workplace and how they have to process being leaders who are more empathetic?
Yeah, so I do leadership development a whole lot. And what you're referring to is also tied with critical thinking skills. And it's also recognizing, again, awareness of your own cognitive biases, right? Just because I think this way doesn't mean that my team are going to think that way or do a certain way that I would do myself. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's sort of really checking in with yourself to understand your blind spots, and being open and flexible to other people's way of thinking and doing things. And a lot of the biggest thing that trips us up is our own assumptions.
Mm.
And everybody makes assumptions. Those are the boundary between assumptions to a bias is we're generalizing too much, right? And we
Mm-hmm.
make assumptions to save time because the more experience we have, the more we're like, oh, been there, done that. I've seen this happen. This is, so we generalize. It's our little mental shortcut,
Right,
right?
right.
To judge people, size up a situation, right? But you gotta be self-aware and what's happening. Not every situation is the same. And
Mm-hmm.
so, like you said, ask questions. That's one of the biggest tip I would give is really understand the intention and the implication of where the other person or other group is coming from.
Yeah.
And, instead of assuming for the better or the worse.
Mm-hmm. No, that's really great advice. And you also talk about the power of sharing personal mistakes and failures too. and
Yeah.
how that is also beneficial. So share a little bit about why that's important.
Yeah, we're all human. And unfortunately, with social media and sort of other things, and that's why I love your podcast, because you really share the human side of the story, the good,
Thank
bad,
you.
the ugly, and the mistakes and triumph, right? It
Hmm.
makes us human. And what I've seen a lot is in the media, social media, print, all that stuff, there's a lot of emphasis on success. Some so and so, made this much, is in this position, doing so many things. And we
Mm.
don't see the other side. And that causes so much angst,
Yeah.
self-blame, and honestly, envy and hating,
Mm.
just because it makes people feel inferior. And that's the last thing I think, we would want to do to have a very civic discussion and cohesive understanding of each other. And so that's why I think, I myself always try to share my mistakes. In fact, there was this article that garnered so much views because it talked about, my side hustle, how much I made, and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, yeah, but that's just one side of the story. So I reached out and to the editor of CNBC, I ended up writing about my three biggest mistakes just because,
Mm.
I want to just help people understand you're going to make a lot of mistakes on your path to success. And
Right.
that is the norm.
Yeah. And that's also the common denominator we share of vulnerability, right? Because we all are going to have those stories, but how many of us are willing to share them? And I think social media as well really even like enhances that, because all you see are like these glossy final photos. I have a friend who said to me, "Do you ever take a bad photo?" I'm like, "Yeah, you'll never see those, honey." Like, you saw the 1000th one. I threw the other 999 into the delete bin. But that's the problem with the internet, right? Everyone is seeing this glossy final product. And to your point, not the work, or they're not sharing that part, the
Right.
work that got them there, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, exactly. So well said, right?
Mm,
That vulnerability brings authenticity.
yeah.
And that's, there's such thing where a true friend is someone who says, "Oh, you too? I felt that way too,"
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's really the common humanity, the common connection when we
Hmm.
experience some of the, bad days together. We share that feeling so we know how it is to be
Yeah.
adulting, right? And so the more we could share that, and just honestly, like, you don't have to go out of your way to share, but just being open about it
Hmm.
will do yourself a favor and other people and have more friendships.
Yeah. It's funny about that too. There's a girl, I forgot her name now, but she's this really stunning, like model-esque girl who has a viral social media account on Instagram. I mean, she's stunning. She's like 5'11", the total supermodel thing. And then one day she just was like, "Okay, I'm kind of done with that." And she started to
Mhm.
show herself really, like, no makeup in the Starbucks line. The hair is matted. She's got a sweatsuit with like stains on it from her kid. I mean, really just like, this is me, right? She just did this whole anti personality, and her numbers like tripled.
Yep.
And so she started getting press because of that. And she was like, I'm getting more coverage now. Or Pamela Anderson, for example, was in the press a lot because in the past few years, she's like, "I'm taking this makeup off, guys. Like, you've seen me overdone, looking like a glamazon, but this is how I look. I've got freckles, my skin's imperfect." And she becomes like the headline on every major publication, from the Wall Street Journal to New York Times. But I think it's a testament to people really are craving
Yes.
the connections with authenticity and knowing they're not the only one and they're not alone. And that's a
Right.
big part of what you're saying.
Absolutely. Yep.
Mm, I love that. I love that. Now let's move on to your card games, which I think are really super too. You have these educational card games that are internationally acclaimed, of course, and they are really about the whole emotional intelligence world. So tell us a little bit about those.
Yeah, it's actually also one of those that I didn't intentionally plan on it, but really through my own personal struggle and just seeing the need that I just kind of whimsically did it. And then obviously more mistakes, many, many iterations. And somehow now it's gotten so big. But say, for example, one of the deck 52 essential coping skills really came out of a class I was teaching at the University of California, Irvine. And it was a quite popular class, and it spanned, before pandemic through pandemic, but there were so many students who wanted to take the class, but they couldn't get in. And also during the pandemic, it was on emotional intelligence. During the pandemic, I needed a way to really support my students, to help them deal with all these influx of emotions from a daily basis as a student, but also on top with pandemic, feeling lonely, socially anxious, and sort of not sure what to do life after college.
Right.
And so because the exercises were so successful in class, I needed a way to kind of almost distill those exercises so that those who cannot get into my class would still have resources and tools to do that. And so that's really how the card deck was created. It was really codified from my assignments, which I say students are writing the syllabus of their life. You get to apply this and really do this to better your own context and setting, because they needed to be culturally responsive. Everybody are dealing with different things. And so it gave you the flexibility of really supporting yourself and building, flexing those resilience skills you needed when times are hard. And so then it just kind of started from there. I had more requests from students, from administrators, from parents. And it's all about building human skills like relationship skills, social skills, critical thinking, coping skills that I just mentioned, and so forth. And so, award-winning, used at places like Harvard and also companies like Google. And so I'm really excited about that.
Wonderful words of wisdom today from Dr. Jenny Wu, Harvard-trained educator and emotional intelligence researcher and founder and CEO of Mind, Brain, Emotions. I've enjoyed our conversation today so much, and thanks for being here today on Motivational Mondays.